Okay, hi everyone. We're going to be doing our summary of chapter 2. We've already done a video on the contextual overview of the Victorian era as well as Stevenson's life. We've done a summary of chapter 1, which is the story of the door, and we're going to be moving on now to chapter 2. At the end of chapter 1, we had Utterson kind of catalysed into an investigation. He wanted to find out why Hyde was connected to Jekyll. And we know, or we're about to find out, that the reason that Jekyll and Hyde are connected, and Utterson knows this, is because Utterson, being Jekyll's lawyer, has made Jekyll's will, and in Jekyll's will, everything is being left to Hyde. And because he's heard this story from his friend Enfield about the man trampling calmly over the child and everything else, he's really unsettled by the connection between Jekyll and Hyde, because Jekyll is such an upstanding citizen that he shouldn't be connected to anyone so downright detestable. So the chapter starts off really the same day, and it's the evening of the same day, and Utterson goes home and he immediately goes to his safe in his house and he takes out the will that he's written for his friend Dr. Jekyll, and he reads over the will just to check that he is correct and remembering that it's being left to Hyde. He reads through the will and he's always been a bit unsettled or perturbed by it, because he doesn't really know why Jekyll is leaving everything to this man that he's never heard of or met. But now he's even more concerned because he's heard about how evil this man could be. So one of the key quotes is that in the will it specifically says that Edward Hyde should step into the said Henry Jekyll's shoes. So effectively what Jekyll has asked is that in his will, if he were to die or disappear for a period of 3 months, then basically Edward Hyde gets to replace him. And that's pretty unsettling to Utterson. He has no idea why that's in there. Some other good quotes within the same part of this chapter are the idea that in Utterson's mind, he now sees Hyde as having detestable attributes and being the definite presentment of a fiend. So basically, because he now has at least some sort of idea about who Hyde is through Enfield's story, he now starts to put a picture in his mind of what this man might look like, and it unsettles him even further. Now the chapter continues with him going now to meet Dr. Lanyon. This is a new character who we've not encountered before, and Lanyon lives in a place called Cavendish Square. Cavendish Square is actually in London still. You can go and visit it. It's just off Oxford Street, and it's big mansions and they're all related to the medical profession. Dr. Lanyon is an old colleague of Henry Jekyll, and Utterson wants to go and speak to him and ask him about any ideas he has about their connection. He goes and speaks with Lanyon and finds out that Lanyon hasn't really spoken to Jekyll in a long time, and the reason for this, and this is a key quote as well, is that he thought that Jekyll was going on a different direction, specifically to do with unscientific balderdash. And basically he thought that Jekyll was pursuing scientific avenues that were nonsensical, and they began to drift apart because of this. This doesn't really help Utterson too much. He just realises that Lanyon doesn't really know much about Hyde at all. Utterson then decides to take matters into his own hands and actually becomes a little bit strange in his pursuit of Hyde. He begins to try and kind of stalk Hyde, or tries to stalk where he might appear. There's a good quote again on page 10 where Utterson begins to haunt the door in the by street of the shops. He essentially stands there morning and night just waiting on Hyde to come back so that he can accost him and start questioning him. So you can see the effect that Hyde begins to have on people around him. Utterson, having never met him, is so enthralled by the investigation to find out who he is that it almost changes Utterson, because Utterson is just a normal, respectable gentleman, but now he's hanging around doorways late at night, stalking people. So Hyde's effect on those around him begins to be quite clear. Then is our first introduction to actually Hyde being seen. It's a really good little introduction here, where Utterson finally manages to see Hyde come to this door, and he kind of steps out and begins to question him. As soon as Utterson goes to speak to him, there's a really great quote which indicates a little bit about Hyde. It says, "Mr. Hyde shrank back with a hissing intake of breath." We'll closely analyse that in future, but specifically the idea of him having a hissing intake of breath it ties into this technique we've discussed before, this zoomorphism, the illusion of a human character to animalistic kind of qualities. Specifically the idea of a snake, which obviously to a Christian Victorian readership would have clear connections to the devil from the book of Genesis in the Bible. So there's an immediate connection to this idea of Hyde being animalistic, but also liking him to the devil in a certain way. The chapter continues then with a bit of an interplay between Utterson and Hyde. And Utterson is left with the sense that he is kind of subhuman. He's consistently referred to as having a deformity or being deformed in some way. And it gives us this idea that he's not actually a complete person. He seems to be animalistic or subhuman in some way. And a really good word and quote for that is that he had something troglodytic about him. Now, troglodyte or troglodytic is something that's basically a kind of a creature that's subhuman, that's not fully developed or evolved. So we have this picture of a man who's not really all there kind of thing. And another great quote from that section is the idea that Utterson read Satan's signature written upon his face. So again, he feels like the devil has had some sort of play in the creation of Hyde. He seems that evil to him. Now the chapter concludes with Utterson really having this opinion that the reason Hyde has such power over Jekyll, because he then finds out when he goes to Jekyll's home that Hyde actually has a key to the dissecting room, is that maybe Hyde has some information about Jekyll and is using it to blackmail him. So there's no sense at this moment that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person. The reader wouldn't know this either, and Utterson doesn't have any idea about it. So it's this idea that there might be some sort of blackmail going on, and Utterson, at the end of this chapter, Utterson wants to try and figure it out, and that's what he believes he'll pursue in the next chapter. So this chapter is really good because it introduces Hyde in terms of having met him. Utterson, who's a trustworthy character and a trustworthy kind of narrative force, we see his opinion of him, and that Hyde is evil. He's clearly subhuman, troglodytic. With the hissing intake of breath, we get all these glimpses of a man who's clearly not completely there. So, really good chapter for us getting an idea of who Hyde is, his evil, and it sets us up for a continuation of Utterson's investigation in the next chapter.